Okay, so our program so far, you've got it up to the point where you've got these 4 buttons and they also reset here. So you can see that this happens, but our next button does nothing. Okay, so what we want to start doing is thinking about how we get in these questions here and in this box and the possible answers here. Now, you can either do it where you just have A, B, C, D, and so on, or you do it where you actually have the answer written in here. Okay, so what we have to do is think about a file that will store this. Now, in reality, in a proper program, you probably would have the text file with the answers here, but of course, you would do something called a database, and the database file would not, you wouldn't be able to open it just normally. Now, what we will do though, we will just create a text file for this. So in order to do it, what we need to say is, well, we need to put in a whole list of questions. Now, I'm going to use it with a specific program called brackets. So I've got it right here. And you've probably got this program on your computer as well, brackets, so you can use that if you wish. And just got some other files open here, so let's close these. So in brackets, what we do is just have a new file, and we can then just save this as a .txt file or .csv. CSV is a type of text file that's comma separated. So what we're going to do is we're going to just number these things, right? So these will be our questions, and we will then do a comma in between each one, and this is how we do it. So I'm going to put in here, first of all, the question. So the operating, I'm going to say the operating system is a and then put something like that, and then have my 4 possible answers. Okay, is a system software, is a application software, comma, and just make this a little bit bigger, application software, utility software, and the last one I'll put malware software. Right, so I've got here, this is going to be the number that's going to indicate which question that we have appearing on our inner program. And the reason that we're going to use these numbers, and this number is basically going to identify it. This is question 1, then I've got 2 and 3 and 4, and we will keep a record in Python. What we will do, we will store every time we've displayed one of these questions and just store this number while we're running the program. And the reason we'll do that is because we don't want the same questions to come up again. Now, in my example, I'm just going to have about 3 or 4 questions, but you'll probably want like 30, 40, 50, loads of different questions, okay? So the first bit is the actual question. Then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 possible answers, and then on the end, I've got a comma here, and on the end, I'm going to put the right answer, because of course, when you're running the program, you need to be able to add a point to the score. So you need to then say which one's the right answer. So we would have a check, and this check is going to say that the first one out of the possible answers is the correct answer, which is system software in this case. So I've got a few more questions that I'm going to put in. So I've just got them copied here. So I'm going to do comma, take that one. So that's files are organized in, and then my 4 possible answers. And then you can see the very last one, it says 3, because that is its third answer is the correct one, right? So they're going to be different every time. So I'll make this a little bit bigger. This is obviously the questions just longer, so you can see that it's going along the whole way along here. And the right answer is all of the above, which would be for that question, right? So then I'm going to do 1 or 2 more, I think. So there's one there, and I'll do number 5, and that will be what does RAM stand for? So RAM is your memory in the computer, and it is random access memory, which is answer number 2. So what you could do is either search on the internet for questions, or use your textbook, right? So you might be doing maths, one about maths or something like that. Just one last thing that you probably want to do is that just make sure you don't have a new line here. So see where it says number 6, and if it's empty, just do backspace so it's got to that point, right? So what I want to do is then save this as a text file. And as I said before, we have 2 options for this. We can either just save it as text, or we can save it as CSV. So we'll probably just save it as we could save it as a CSV, but we'll just save it as text, I think, for the moment. Right, so I've got my quiz here, I believe. Right, so here I've got the name that I've got to put for this text file. So I'm just going to call it questions.txt. So I need to make sure I put the file extension on the end, because brackets, this program brackets, allows us to save in multiple different file formats. So it allows us to save as like HTML, TXT, RTF, all these different CSV as well, all these different text formats. So I'm just saving it as text and calling it questions. Now, maybe you want to give it something like a different name, so maybe you could just call it Q, so it's q.txt. Right, so now I've got that saved. I'm just going to close it. Don't need it open. Now, what we need to now think about is how do we get that information into our program? How do we get the information from Q into here? So this is the bit that's a bit more complicated to think about, okay? So we can read a text file in Python. We can do that. So what do we need to do? Well, it's best not to like incorporate it into any of these. Now, all of our graphics is in this procedure called GUI. And this one is a procedure that just resets your buttons. And this is like a procedure which checks if a button's been pressed, okay? So above this button pressed, we will just do another one. And this one, we're just going to say def read file, and then open and close brackets. And with the read file, what we're going to do is just read that text file and then print out into a shell what's in the text file, okay? Now, we'll have to introduce you to 1 or 2 new things. So the new thing that I have to introduce you to is an array. So we have looked at arrays a little bit before. So let me show you an example of an array here. Here's one, this one here, text or font text, whatever you've called it. And it's got 2 items in it. And it's got this string and it's got this integer. Now that is a type of an array called a tuple. Okay, so tuple with string and int, right? So that's what this is. Now this specific type, you can see it's got these just normal parenthesis brackets. What that means is that this is not changeable. We can't change this. So we're going to do a different type of one where we want to have an empty array, and then we want to add stuff into it. Okay, so this one will be, we'll say read the text file with questions and populate an array. Okay, so the array, what we can do is just give it a name. So it's the same as a variable. I'm just going to call it data, right? Because that's what these questions are. It's just a bunch of data. You could call it questions if you want. So this is the identifier name for this variable, right? So if you remember, we've got things like answer here. Answer is a variable, right? Button A is a variable, and we're just doing something to button A. Win is a variable. FG color is a variable, BG color is a variable, text is a variable. All these are variables. And data is also a variable, but it's going to store more than one thing. Okay, so in this case, what we're going to do is just leave it empty for the minute. So you can see I've done square brackets here, and this is an array. Okay, now I did say that the one down below here is also an array, but we call it a tuple in Python. And this one is also an array, but this type of array is called a list. A list, okay? So it's got square brackets and you call that a list. So think of it just like a shopping list, right? We're just going to put loads of things inside of here. And what we'll do, we'll be putting strings in here because everything from our text file called qtext here, all of this stuff will come in as a string. So that will be something that are as strings, let's say. So the one thing we'll have to think about is this, where these numbers we want to use, if we want to check something is equal to this number, we would have to make sure that we're checking what data type it is, because they're all going to come in, because it's a text file, as strings. Okay, so now we've got data. What we need to do is open the file. So what we will do is we will say file. This is going to be the best way to do it. So file is also a variable here, and this variable is going to contain our text file. So we're going to use a special function, right? So remember what functions are. We have functions in different places, like, well, we don't have many functions really in here, to be honest, but we've got this one, lambda is a special kind of function. We've got tk, which is a function, but comes from tkinter, of course. Right? So we're going to use a function called open, and it's open and close brackets. Now, if I just do the open bracket, you can see it says, right, you've got to give the name of the file, the mode of what you want to do. Now the mode, it's given an example of R, which is actually the mode we do want to use, and R means to read the text file. But you could also do W, which would be to write a text file, so that would basically mean create a text file. So we could get Python to actually make a new text file in here if we wanted to, but we're going to use R to read this one. And then you can see we've got these other things, buffering and coding, with errors, new line, and different stuff, but we're not going to use all of them. We're just going to use file and mode, really. So in here, I need to put double quotes, and then comma, and then mode equals, and then double quotes, and then close the brackets. Oops, close the brackets here. Right, so in the first bit, I need to put the file name. So I've called it q.txt, so that's what I'm going to write. q.txt is my text file. So you're using Windows, so just I've got my Mac set up so I can see the file types here. So you can see I can see background.png, .png, and so on. In Windows, you might not see it, so just make sure it's a text file by right-clicking on it and checking properties. Okay. So q.txt, and the mode is lowercase r, so don't put uppercase r like that, put r lowercase, and that is to read the file. So we've got two variables, data, which is going to contain, which at the minute contains an empty list, which is a type of array, and then file, which is containing a function, just like we have window contains this function that creates a window. This one contains our file at the minute. Right, so the next bit, what we want to do is we want to read each line within the file. So what we can do here is we can say print file first and just see if this has worked, right? So we'll print file. Now, when we run the program, if I run it now, you'll see absolutely nothing's happened, right? It's not done this at all because we're not calling this to happen. If you notice that when we run our program, at the very bottom, we're calling GUI, right? So we could turn this off if we want. So this would be a good idea just to show you how to do this kind of stuff. So turn it off by just putting a comment hashtag on front of it. And then underneath, we could then put read file. So basically, we're going to turn off all of this and just run this procedure. Okay, so it's called read file, open and close brackets. So I'm just going to write read file, open and close brackets at the very bottom. Okay, now I could have put it up actually underneath here. I could have done that, but I'm just going to do it at the bottom because I don't want to run my graphics or anything at the minute. So I'm just going to run the program without anything except for read file. Right, so now you can see that my program that has all the graphics in it has not actually appeared. It hasn't loaded up. Now I've printed out file, this variable file, and you can see what it says. So it's saying that we got this text wrapper, which is basically just a bunch of text, and the name of the file, the mode that we did is R. Now this encoding, it is by default done this encoding, which is UTF. This is Unicode, and it's not really worth explaining exactly how that works at the minute, but Unicode 8 is essentially the way characters are encoded on a computer, because everything on the computer is in binary. So if you end up doing A-level computer science, you would find out exactly what this means about Unicode. Okay, but anyway, we can see that this works, that we've been able to read the file. So now we can take away this print file statement here, and what we want to do is actually read each line in the file. So we will now introduce a for loop to do that. Okay, so we're going to loop, we'll say iterate, because that's the official term. Iterate loop each line in the file and populates the array. Okay, so what we're going to do is loop through this file one line at a time, and every single line we're going to put into this data here. Right, so how do we do it? Well, this for loop is starting off with 4. Right, now we could just say 4x in line, in file, like this. You could do this kind of thing. Right, so to explain how that works, if I just open this text file, as you see it here, I'm going to explain what x is. X, in this case, so if I say 4x in file, x the first time, because this is a loop, so this loop is this is called a count controlled loop. It does it a number of times, and the number of times it's going to do it, well, it's going to be 5 times, because I've got 5 lines of questions in my text file. So x is all of this is equal to all of this line the very first time. So whenever it reads the file, it reads all of this information, and then I say 4x in file. So for the first line in the file, then I want to do something with that, which will be to append or put it into data. Okay. Now we can call it x, or you could call it line or something like that. But x is going to be this the first time, then it's going to be this second line, then it's going to be the third line, fourth line, and fifth line. So it goes through them one at a time. So if you want, we can put line. It doesn't matter. So this is like a variable as well, but it's only a variable used within this loop, within this for loop. Okay. Right. So I'm going to space this out a wee bit. So whenever I press enter here, it automatically goes underneath here. So I'm just going to leave that as line, and then I'm going to say data. Right. So data is my array, and this array, what I'm going to do is append to it. Now append is a word which means sort of to add on to the end of something. So you can imagine you're like gluing it onto the end or something. You might say append, and you can't really say add. It's not the same as adding, right? But if you imagine like a queue, so here I've got people are waiting for a queue, and this queue is empty, at the minute. There's nobody in the queue, and the first item will go into, or the first line is going to go into that empty queue. So then I'm filling up this data variable with a list of information. So we do dot append. Now you notice that it's dot append. So that is with an open close brackets, and this dot append is another example of a method, right? Dot notation. So we've seen it before. You see it down here, look. Button A dot config. We did win.title, win.geometry, win.icon bitmap. There's lots of times where we're using these methods. So you can even see it in our title, say this title frame, where I'm saying title frame dot place. These are methods that are used to affect this variable. So this variable is equal to being a frame in this case, or you can see this variable is equal to being a file, like an image file, and then I'm making a label, I'm putting that image in the label, and doing all these kind of different things like that, okay? So here I'm using dot append for this one, so another method which is going to affect data. Right, so what do I want to append? Well, I want to append line. Now, we will find out fairly quickly that this line, so this line of code, how many times is it going to happen? 5 times. This happens exactly 5 times because I've got 5 items in my file, right? So it's going to happen exactly 5 times. So data, what we want to do is then just print it out. Now, if I press enter, of course, it straight away goes to the indentation under the same block in my for loop. But I'm finished my for loop. I don't want to do anything more in the for loop. And we can actually just look at this. We'll just do this for the moment. So I'll just do print data. And what this is going to do, this is going to print out data lots of different times. And the first time it prints it out, it's only going to have 1 line in it. And then the second time it prints it out, it's going to have 2 lines. Then the third time, it's going to have 3 lines and so on, right? So you'll see what happens here. There you go. Right, so it's printed it all out. It's kind of hard to see what's going on here because it sort of goes on to different lines. So you can see this first one at the very top. It's got the first line there, okay? And then on the second time it's printed out, it's got 2 lines. It's got the second one, which ends here. And then on the third one, it goes all the way down to here, right? So it's got the first line, then it's got the second, and then it's got the third, as you can see here. Now, there's a few other things that we will look at with this, but the best way to do this is, of course, instead of having it indented within this for loop, if I just do backspace, this is going to then print my data out 1 time instead of doing it 5 times, and every time it has a little bit more data in it. So print it 1 time, there you go. Okay, now this is classified as a 1D array. Okay, so you can see this. Now, the reason it's a 1D array is because it's 1D is 1-dimensional. So let's say, for example, you have a shopping list, and in that shopping list you've got bread, milk, and cheese, right? That would be considered a 1D array. And where is it spaced out here? Well, here you can see you've got 1 square bracket and another square bracket here. So this data starts off being empty. I've added all the information, looped through it 5 times and added it all into data, and then I'm just printing it once at the end here. So I've got 1 square bracket at the beginning, 1 square bracket at the end. Okay, so that tells me it's a 1-dimensional array. And how many items are in this 1-dimensional array? It's 5 items, right? So here I can see a single quote, and that single quote, there will be another one on the other end, and there it is down here. And then there is a comma, and then I've got this second one, okay? So it's a bit like if I did, this is how it kind of looks like. So you say single quote, and I'm just going to put A B, C, right? This is what my list up here essentially looks like, except for I don't have A, B, C in it. I have all of this information. So this one is kind of like equal to all the way to here. That is equal to like A, so that's the first bit of information. Then I've got here 2, which goes all the way to, well, it just goes up to here, right? So you can see that one, number 2. That's like B, and then C is the third one, and so on, right? Now, what we want to think about here is this list is indexed. So what does index mean? Well, indexing is basically assigning a number to this, which is puts it in order. So even though I might have B here, A there, and I don't know, F here, something like that, BAF, this would be identified as being index 0, okay? This one is index 1, and this is index 2. So what this means is that this is the first item, so it begins with 0, right? So it doesn't begin with 1. So you would normally think that this is 1, 2, and 3. But this is 0, and then this is 1, and then this is 2, okay? So in this case, this is 0, okay? So if I typed, and we can do this now, so we'll try this. So instead of printing data, let's just print the first one from data. So I can do some square brackets inside of here. And if I do 0, and then run that, press F5 to run this, right? It's just given me the first one. See that? Number 1, that's the first one, only, yeah? We can try a different one. So if we do 5, let's see what happens here. Okay, interesting. It says list index out of range because I don't have a 5th one. Or I do have a 5th one, but it's not index number 5, it's index number 4, okay? Because we begin with 0, so it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Even though I've got 5 items, it's up to 4. So it's a little bit confusing at first. So this is my last item in here, and this is good. So you can see, look, it's number 5, right? Because that's what's in my text file, and there's the number 2 indicates the correct answer, which is this one, random access memory. So what we want, now we've got this information in here, but if I just take out those square brackets again and we look at it, we actually do have a few problems. So first of all, when we talked about indexes, that's great that I can access all of this, but in actual fact, I want to access, for example, just this one, or just this one, or just this one, right? Now, how do I access the index of these, right? This is problematic because each one's different length. Now, I could do, for example, 0, and then I could do 0 again, right? So the index, I'm saying index 0 of data, and then 0 of 0, right? So this is going to give me, we'll have a look, number 1. And why is it number 1? Because here is the number 1. But this is where the problem lies. How do I get all of this information, right? Because if I do number 2 here, skip 1, or let's say I do 1, right? Let's see what happens. Okay, so it's given me a comma because directly after 1, I've got a comma. So that would be 1, a space is 2, and then this one's 3, right? So just the T. So if I do that, I get the T, right? So this is hugely problematic because this is not the way I really want to do this. I want to be able to access, if I did 0, 3, that would hopefully give me, if this was 0, 1, 2, 3, it would give me application software, right? If that's right, 0, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I would have wanted to say application software, not T down here. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to try and make that happen right now. Now, there's a couple of things we also need to look at with this, is that I've got at the end of each one, I've got this \n. Now, you may have seen \n before. What this does, this is a bit of encoding that puts a new line. So my text file is at the end of a line, it has a new line, right? So it goes on to the next line, right? So this \n is essentially that. It's a bit of encoding in there that does that new line each time. So we want to actually get rid of that. We want to take that out. So we can do that first, take that out by saying line dot strip open and close brackets. Right? So if we, if I just actually print data by itself and then print the letter T as well, right? So you can see now at the end of one, this one, or before two, so up here I've got this n, \n, now I've got rid of it. So that is applied here, here, there's the 3, it hasn't got it, the 4 hasn't got it, and here this one, after this one, it doesn't have it either, right? So then I've got rid of that, that's great. But the next thing I want to do is split this list up even more. So I told you that this is a one-dimensional array. What we want to do is make it a list of lists. So we want to make it a two-dimensional array. So I'm going to say 2D array, even though at the minute it's not. There it's a 1D array, and when we print it here, of course you can see it's a 1D array, but we want to make it a 2D array, so it's a list of lists. Now, if you don't understand what a list of lists is, think of it like your mum gives you a shopping list and you have to go into different shops. So she says, Mercadona, buy milk, cheese and bread. And then she says, go to, I don't know, Carrefour and get eggs and yogurts, right? So you're kind of got two separate lists. You've got one for Mercadona and one for Carrefour. So we're going to make that, do exactly the same thing here. So how do we do it? Well, because we've made a comma separated file, we can say that we want to split this at every single comma that we've got in here. So we will do that. We'll just say on the end of this dot strip method, we can add another method, which is dot split. And the dot split, we need to specify what we want to split it by. So we can do double quotes or you can do single quotes, doesn't matter which. But in between, you want to say what you want to split it by, and we want to split it by a comma because that's what we've got. Now, if you did something like this, like a space, it would split it every time there's a space in your text file. So for example, there's a space, between the and operating is a space, between operating system is a space, everywhere you've got a space, right? But that's not what we want to do. We want to split by comma. Okay, so now we will print the data. We'll see that looks different, but you will also notice that this one will look different. And I think I mentioned before we wanted it to say application software. Oops. So I'm just going to run this program. And there it is, says application software. Amazing, right? So now the array or this list looks different. So it's a two-dimensional array or two-dimensional list. And you can see that by 2 square brackets at the front, 2 square brackets at the end. And why is that? Well, you got 1 square bracket at the front and 1 at the end. That's saying this, all of this is a list. And then this square bracket, well, where is its close square bracket? Here it is here, right? So that's that one. Okay, so it's a list within a list. So it's quite cool that you can do this. And as you can see with this example where I've just printed out application software, that is because I'm printing out data 0 and then the third one, well, which is actually the fourth one, right? So here you can see 0, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, right? The fourth item, which is application software. So the 0 indicates all of this one, and the 3 there, sorry, indicates this item. So we could do it, we could keep on doing it. You could say, like, say you want to get the next one along, or you want to get the operating system. So to get the question, for example, to print out the question, if I put 1, run this again, and it says the operating system is okay, brilliant. So that means that we can access individual bits of information from our text file now. So this text file is essentially ready for us to be able to use. Now, we don't need to print this, of course, so this was just for testing, so I'm going to just get rid of that. And you might be thinking, well, how do we then get the information out of read file? Because all of this is called a local variable. That means this variable, this list, is only accessible within read file. So you may have noticed that before we did something like this, we did global button A, B, and C. That meant that we could access button A, B, and C, which is in down here. These are local variables. There's local 1, local, local, and so on. And we said global though above it, which then just made them so that we can access them globally within our program. So in this case, we can actually just change it here. We could say, we can do stuff to it, and here we can check or change it as well. Sorry, not check it, change it inside of button pressed. But with this data, it's currently not accessible anywhere else. So what we want to do is change this into a function. Now, we've called these, I'm calling these procedures, right? So reset buttons is a procedure, GUI is a procedure. You see it's got nothing in the brackets, but it also doesn't output as such anything. Now, when I say output, that's a bit complicated because when the GUI, for example, does output, it shows you a graphical user interface. And if you do something like print, it outputs to here as well. But it's not returning an answer. So what we're wanting to do is to return data. So we can do that down here by just writing return data. So if I run read file, it should return data. Okay, so that's what I wanted to do. So you can see I'm running read file down here, and if I run it, actually, you may notice that it just does nothing, right? So you're thinking, well, wait a minute, did you not say it would return the data? Yes, it would usually return the data, but what you would have to do is actually sort of print this out, okay? So you could print that out in a way, but we'll not do that at the moment. What we're going to do is use this read file at a later point.